The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 37. Lazarus and Letters. July 1997. The funeral passed in a numb, hazy blur for Harry. He had the comfort of Ginny and Ron, but knowing he had been betrayed by people he thought he knew cut deeply. He did not even bother to wipe the tears from his face as Dumbledore's tomb was magicked into place. The train carried him back to the Dursleys and number 4 Privet Drive, but he could not muster enough energy to care. He sat in his room for 12 days, hardly leaving except for the loo. His aunt was happy to avoid him, and sent food up to him using Dudley. On day 13, an owl pecked at the window. It was not the first owl he had received. The Weasley owls had all come, bearing notes of encouragement, filled with platitudes, saying things like, "This too shall pass," and "Just give it time." Sirius had written to say that everything would work out all right, and that Harry could come and visit soon. Even this barely stirred Harry's interests. There was one letter that he did not receive, but wanted the most. He needed an explanation, and he needed it from her. Angrily, he stalked to the window and took the letter from the bird. After opening it, he found himself staggering backwards, tripping over a chair, and going ass of a tea kettle onto the floor. "What's all that infernal racket?" Uncle Vernon's voice boomed up from the ground floor. Harry did not hear him. The letter was written in a familiar, slanting handwriting. It was unsigned, and only contained 2 sentences, but Harry had to read it 5 times to be certain of what it said. "Harry, Professors Lupin and McGonagall will come for you tomorrow. We will explain everything." Hermione smoothed down her summer dress nervously. "What time are they coming?" "Remus and Minerva went a little whinging at 4 o'clock. They will need to discuss a few things with Harry's family, but they should be along shortly. Before he arrives, tell me about your encounter with Lord Voldemort after I died," Albus Dumbledore asked her kindly. She blew out a breath. "It wasn't as horrible as I expected. He was disappointed that we were not the ones to carry out the deed, but he said he expected it. He plans to put Snape as head of Hogwarts by September." "I am certain that Severus will do an admirable job," Dumbledore said. "I assume, then, that Voldemort is moving forward on his plans for the Ministry?" This question was directed to Richard. "Yes, he has a couple of men working to infuriate some of the leadership there," Richard answered. "Imperious, Dad," Hermione corrected him. "Yes, and infurious is something quite different," Dumbledore smiled. "Well, they appear to be making progress at infiltrating the upper echelons of the Ministry. I feel as though within a month, 6 weeks at most, they may be poised to take over. I was just speaking to Tonks about it in the kitchen." "And as far as you know, the Death Eaters are unaware that Harry is coming here today?" Dumbledore asked urgently. Though Richard had already answered this question numerous times, as it was asked by several members of the Order, he answered it again, gladly. "No, he thinks that Harry will not be moved until the end of the month. He isn't expecting the boy to move so soon." "That's good," Dumbledore said. "And how is Draco handling everything?" "He could be better. Having Voldemort as a house guest is stressful. Now that Draco has supposedly sworn his allegiance to him, there's been talk of him taking the Dark Mark," said Hermione. She was understating it a bit. The last time they'd had a moment alone, Draco had nearly broken down in tears at the very idea of being branded with a skull and snake. Dumbledore looked away, abashed. "I hate it for him." "As do I," Hermione said sorrowfully. "For now, Lucius and Narcissa have taken to keeping Draco away from Voldemort as much as possible, aside from group meetings." Behind them, the Floo roared to life. Sirius hurried in from the next room. "Is that Harry?" When he saw that it was Molly and Arthur, accompanied by Ginny and Ron, he masked his disappointment with a smile of greeting. "They aren't back yet?" Molly fretted. "Oh, I hope those awful people don't give Harry trouble. I've never liked them." Noticing Richard in their midst, Arthur was quick to clarify. "Not because they are Muggles, you understand. They are just a special breed, all their own." Richard nodded his understanding. He had heard a few of the horror stories about the Dursleys from Hermione over the years. Behind the Weasleys, the Floo roared again. Harry Potter rushed forward, taking in the group gathered there. He was followed by Lupin and McGonagall. He looked around, his eyes alighting on the Grangers seated next to the man he thought dead up until a little less than 24 hours before. It had been a tearful, restless discussion. Harry lashed out at nearly everyone, including the Weasley children who'd had practically no forewarning at all. Finally, mercifully, he had calmed down enough that he didn't look as though he wanted to Avada someone on the spot. Tonks had joined them, and Kreacher brought tea, which went mostly ignored. The young wizard ran his hands through his hair, exposing the lightning scar. "So, whatever Snape shot, it wasn't the killing curse." "All an act, Potter," explained McGonagall gently. "Professor Snape did not use the killing curse. He transfigured his blasting curse to be green, and performed it non-verbally, just after saying the incantation for the killing curse. Because he did not intend to kill Dumbledore, the words were simply that. Words, with no meaning behind them. Remus and Sirius caught Dumbledore below, and Nymphadora brought him here." "And Hermione, Draco, they were a part of it. They knew, and didn't tell me ahead of time." Harry had refused to look at her since arriving, but now he turned blazing green eyes on her. "What the hell were you thinking, agreeing to this?" "We didn't want to, Harry. I felt awful. But the Order knew that you would be under scrutiny at the funeral. If your grief didn't look real, it might seem suspicious. As it was, the fact that Snape performed the Avada when he was supposedly reformed—" "Supposedly," Harry said bitingly. "Harry," Professor Dumbledore said chidingly, "I cannot speak to why Professor Snape has chosen his side. It is his secret to tell. But even now, I have complete confidence in him." Sirius stood and warmed his hands at the fire. "Voldemort assigned Draco and Hermione to kill Dumbledore. They came to him back in October to let him know. The plan has been in the works for quite some time." Harry rubbed at his scar, deep in thought, and stood to join Sirius next to the fireplace. "So now they're going to be like her father? Undercover, masquerading as Death Eaters?" Hermione sniffled, and gratefully accepted the gesture when Ginny put a comforting arm around her. "I'm afraid so. I'm not sure we have another choice." An hour later, Minerva departed, and Kingsley arrived. He and Tonks fell into a lengthy discussion with Sirius and Lupin about the tenuous state of the Ministry. Hermione and the Weasleys had gone off in search of the makings for dinner in the kitchen, and Harry was left alone with Richard and Professor Dumbledore. "Harry, let me apologize again for keeping this secret from you," Dumbledore said. You and I witnessed second-hand exactly how harmful keeping secrets could be this year, many times over in the pensieve. All of the things we discussed, the things that need to be found, I've asked you to keep them between us. However, with the changes on the horizon, the Ministry, Death Eaters at Hogwarts, I fear your 7th year will not go as one might have hoped." Harry nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about it. Back when I thought you were... well, when I thought I was going to have to figure it all out for myself. I had decided that I needed to go, to search these things out on my own." "You should not do it alone. I will be here, and Sirius, Lupin, the others. We can help you," Dumbledore said. "I may not be able to go out and search, but if there is any help I can offer, any advice—" "Thank you, sir, but this is my fight. It's between me and Voldemort. I think it best if I go it alone." "Harry, if I may speak?" Richard asked superciliously. Harry nodded. "Keeping secrets is necessary in some cases. Sometimes it keeps people safe, keeps dangers at bay. But other times, when you need help, there is no shame in letting people in." He sighed and looked down. "We all keep secrets. Some are big, others not so much. I have kept something from my family for many years in order to keep them safe, and there are times I regret that. But if we are to defeat this man, it's not something you'll have to do alone." Harry sat back in thought. "I've trusted Ron with my life plenty of times before. Perhaps he would be willing to help." "I'm certain of it," Dumbledore said. "Miss Granger and Mr. Malfoy have also stepped up to help you in the past." "That's true. And Sirius and Lupin have been there for me so many times. They're like the uncles I wish I'd had growing up," Harry said with a faraway look. Dumbledore leaned forward. "I kept secrets from you for most of your 5th year, and it nearly destroyed you. I vowed to tell you more this past year, but I must confess I haven't told you everything. There are still some things you will need to learn for yourself, but I feel certain that you are up for the task." "Thank you, sir." The short summer season passed quickly. Hermione took up doubles tennis with Richard, telling Linda that Richard's friend Robert had a daughter who was as hopeless at tennis as she was, and they were hoping to improve together. Hermione found the meetings with Death Eaters to be filled with long stretches of ridiculous discussion and vaguely menacing rhetoric, punctuated by the occasional horrific jolt of violence. More than once she was made to witness torture by Voldemort or Bellatrix. Draco had given her some occlumency techniques to try. Whilst she was not proficient at it, it was enough that she could compartmentalize her thoughts during these times to keep her face somewhat neutral. She was continually amazed at her father's ability to do the same without the benefit of occlumency. Her only comfort in all of this, besides knowing that her mother was safe in blissful ignorance of this entire situation, was her few stolen moments alone with Draco. She found herself daydreaming about just such a moment on Tuesday morning at the breakfast table. Her parents had already left for work, so she was alone when the letter for Hogwarts arrived. It made her stop short. Hogwarts? Dear God, could she really show her face there again? There were only a few students and professors who knew the truth about what had happened at the end of the last school year. Everyone would hate her. She would be a pariah. It would be first year all over again, nearly friendless, and lonely within her own house, and yet so much worse. Because now it wasn't just that nobody knew her, or that she was different because she was Muggle-born. No, they would have every reason to hate her, to shun her. And the worst of it was, thinking back over some of the awful things that she'd seen this summer, a part of her had to agree with them. September 1997. The welcoming feast for his 7th year was by far the most sombre and dispirited that Draco had ever seen. Several students were missing from every table, and the newest class of first years was one of the smallest they'd had since he'd been there. Hermione was seated at the Gryffindor table, more from habit than anything else. She sat between Ginny Weasley and Neville Longbottom. The former appeared to be holding her hand under the table. The latter seemed to be leaning as far away from her as he possibly could. Two of her best friends, Potter and the Weasel, were missing. Draco wasn't surprised that Potter wasn't there. Soon after Dumbledore's obituary had appeared in the Daily Prophet, there had been questions about the circumstances of Dumbledore's death. The only name that was mentioned in connection with his death was Harry Potter. The article had not outright accused the young wizard of murder, but it had not painted him in a good light. Clearly, Voldemort's influence was already reaching the Prophet. Weasley being missing was a bit more of a mystery. The Weasley family, though unconventional by wizarding standards, were part of the Sacred 28 of purebloods. Hermione had said that she had seen him over the summer, so it seemed odd that the ginger wizard wasn't at school. Draco reminded himself to offer her a seat at the Slytherin table, should she want it. Not that the atmosphere was that much better among the snakes, he realized as the weeks crept on. A handful were gone. Blaise had indeed gone to Italy. The Greengrasses and Bletchleys had left for America. The only ones remaining of Draco's class of Slytherins were Pansy, Theo, Goyle, Crabbe, and Millie. The Slytherins who were left were afraid to say the wrong thing to each other. Besides a handful who had been rather vocal, or who had been involved in a plot to kill the headmaster the previous year, it was impossible to tell who supported the Dark Lord. Certain classes were simply no longer held this year. Professors Vector, Babbling, and Sinistra had apparently left the British wizarding world over the summer, leaving vacancies in arithmancy, ancient runes, and astronomy. Seeing as these were 3 of Draco's and Hermione's newt subjects, this was a big blow to their magical education. It was understandable, however. Professor Sinistra was married to a Muggle-born, and Professors Babbling and Vector had been quite vocal over the years in their support of peaceful Muggle relations. Muggle studies was now compulsory, but was being taught by Alecto Caro, who had no business being near children or teaching anyone anything, ever, particularly about Muggles. Her social skills and level of knowledge mirrored that of her unintelligent brother Amicus, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. By October, it was clear that the course should be renamed simply Dark Arts. Students were shown unforgivables, offensive hexes and curses rather than defensive ones. It had become a place for petty payback and grudge airing. More than once, Hermione had found herself cursed when her back was turned. The fact that the room was full of Gryffindors and Ravenclaws made it so much worse. It made it worse knowing that whatever retribution she was receiving, Draco was getting double. October 1997. Sometime in October, Hermione moved into Pansy's room in the Slytherin dormitories. Parvati and Lavender had made it clear that she was no longer welcome in their room. Ginny offered for her to bunk with the 6th-year girls, but Hermione knew that Romilda, Agnes, and Ashley hated her just as much as everyone else did. "It's not a popularity contest, Granger," Pansy had said flippantly, blowing pink smoke rings with her lavender cigarette. "And if it was, you'd have already lost that battle with my old roommate, Millie. She's been out with about half the wizards in this place, you know." Despite her distress, Hermione whipped her head around in surprise. "Really? Millicent Bulstrode?" Pansy smiled. "Oh, yeah. She might keep her school trunks in here for appearances, but I'm willing to bet that she's over in the Hufflepuff 7th-year quarters as we speak." Hermione racked her brain. There was only one 7th-year boy left in Hufflepuff, head boy Ernie Macmillan. "Ernie?" she asked, amazed. "Sometimes." Pansy lifted an eyebrow at her. "But sometimes Susan." Hermione's jaw could not help but drop open. Well, good for her. Good for them, really. Pansy laughed. "And what about you, Granger? Have you done anything good lately?" Hermione blushed. No, not... yes. I suppose your whole adventure with Draco last June probably put a damper on your love life," Pansy said drolly. She blushed harder. "I mean, Draco is an excellent kisser, if that's what you mean," she mumbled, then immediately regretted it as Pansy nearly fell off of her bed with how quickly she sat up. "Hold on, Granger. You've dated him for years. Are you telling me that you and Draco have only played tonsil Quidditch?" Hermione rolled her eyes and huffed. "Could you be more crass, Pansy?" "Yes, which I could be. Now, quit evading the question and answer me." "Pansy, this is none of your business." "I bet I know what's going on. Lucius got to him." "What do you mean?" Hermione asked in confusion. The dark-haired witch snorted at laughter and ground out her cigarette. "Every pure-blood parent gives a very nice and well-intentioned speech to their children whenever they leave for Hogwarts. The importance of purity, the detrimental nature of indecency, the significance of the betrothal, always with the betrothal." She fell back on her bed. "Merlin, I thought Anthony Goldstein was going to knock himself senseless when I touched his bum when we kissed once." Hermione considered what Pansy was saying. It did make sense. It was clear that the importance of the betrothal contract had been drilled into Draco's head. Still, it wasn't like either of them had really felt up to doing much this year, anyway. If there was one thing that could kill a mood of romance quickly, it was the day-to-day situation they found themselves in now. One Wednesday in late October, Hermione was roused from sleep, surprised to find Hedwig waiting for her on her nightstand. Houdini sniffed hopefully at the bird, perhaps thinking fondly of Thorn, Draco's eagle owl. She nuzzled Hedwig's cheek sleepily and summoned a few owl treats from a jar in her trunk. Sated, Hedwig swept out of the door to make her way to the owlery. Picking up Houdini and settling him on her chest to pet as she read, she unsealed the letter. But it was very short, only containing a few words. M.M. Fire. Troll Knight, -1. Bring him. Hermione read it several times, trying to discern the meaning within. It was clearly written in Ron's messy handwriting, so at least he was all right, wherever he was. Troll Knight. That must mean the night she encountered the troll with Harry, Ron, and Draco, back in first year. Halloween was 2 nights away, so he must mean tomorrow night. Bring him. Did this mean Draco? Snape? Her father? Houdini? Surely Ron meant Draco, though it seemed odd, considering how the 2 wizards didn't always get on well. M.M. Fire. As she was sure Ron did not mean Moaning Myrtle, it had to mean Minerva McGonagall. It was late. Draco was likely awake in bed, but as he still roomed with Vincent and Greg, sympathizers of the Dark Lord, she could not very well go to him and announce that they needed to meet Ron Weasley tomorrow night. She dashed off a quick note and concealed it within the bow-tie collar around Houdini's neck. "Take this to Draco," she whispered, and the white ferret disappeared into the darkness. Chapter 38. Mucelidae in the Ministry. "No idea what Weasley wants, then," Draco drawled, settling back on one of the stiff red and gold brocade Queen Anne chairs in McGonagall's office. Houdini immediately jumped into his lap, curling up and settling into a ball shape. They had arranged with Professor McGonagall to ostensibly be given detention that evening, starting at 8 o'clock. She had let them into the office, then departed for her living quarters. "No, I just wish she would have given us a time to be here. Are we just expected to wait around here all night?" It was nearly 10 o'clock, and all of their homework was finished. Plus, Draco had already beaten her at wizarding chess twice. "I wouldn't have thought you of all witches would have objected to spending a night with me alone," Draco smirked. She rolled her eyes. "Draco, if you aren't willing to damage your future betrothal contract in your dormitory, or the room of requirement, or any other number of private places, I have to assume the Transfigurations Professor's office is safe from your hedonistic and unfettered debauchery." Draco bit his lip with a grin. "You know it gets me all hot and bothered when you use big words, Hermione." Moving the little ferret off of him, and leaving the discomfort of the armchair, he moved to where she sat in front of the fire, and settled himself cross-legged next to her. She mirrored his position, facing him. Then, without warning, he rose to his knees to kiss her deeply. He overbalanced, tipping forwards so that she had to lean back to avoid being crushed by him. He braced one hand on the floor behind her as their lips met. Then her arms encircled him, and they fell back to the rug behind her, both of them heedless of their surroundings. His senses were drowning in her, the smell of her hair and the taste of her neck. "Oi! What the hell is this, then?" Ron Weasley's grating voice interrupted them. "Oh, bollocks," Draco muttered, having forgotten where they were and who they were waiting for a moment. Pushing himself back into a cross-legged position, he looked away in embarrassment from the fireplace grate, where the heads of Weasley and Potter floated above the fire, greenly. "Enjoying seventh year?" Potter joked, raising an eyebrow at Hermione. She sputtered, Sorry, we just, Yeah, we were almost here for it, we know," Weasley muttered, rolling his eyes. "Sod off, wanker," Draco grumbled quietly, behind Hermione. Potter butted in. "Never mind all that. We need to talk. Can you come through the flue? My knee's already hurt." "Where are you?" Draco asked. He sat up on his haunches, next to Hermione. Potter's hand reached through the flue at him, holding out a small slip of paper. "Read this," he said. "The headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix can be found at 12 Grimmauld Place." Draco looked back up at Potter. "You couldn't have just told me that." Potter rolled his eyes. "Can you just come through?" A short while later, the 5 of them were settled in a small second-floor bedroom within Grimmauld Place, the sleeping white ferret curled up on Hermione's shoulders. They had snuck quietly up the stairs, Harry warning them about the painting of Sirius's mother in the entry. "Anyone else sleeping on this floor?" Draco asked quietly. "No," Ron said. "Dumbledore has a room on the first floor, just above the ground floor sitting room, and Sirius is upstairs in the main family quarters." "Professor Lupin isn't here?" she asked. "He actually moved out quite a while back. Did you realize that he and Tonks got married?" Harry asked. "You're kidding! I had no idea they were even an item," Hermione gasped. "Yes, apparently they've been seeing each other for a while. They just told us a few nights ago at dinner that they are expecting a baby in the spring," Harry replied. "Oh my goodness!" breathed Hermione, as Draco's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I'm to have another cousin?" he asked with a touch of awe in his voice. Having grown up alone with only a few distant relations in France, aside from his mother and father, the fact that he had 2 cousins now was already a lot. Gaining a 3rd cousin, a baby no less, seemed outlandish. "Right. I forget sometimes that you're related to the Blacks," Ron said, settling back on one of the 2 beds in the room. Harry sat at the foot of Ron's bed, leaving their guests to settle on the other one. It was clear to Hermione that the 2 young wizards bunked in this room together, judging from the amount of clothing and objects strewn about haphazardly. There was a faint smell of sweaty socks that lingered in the room. She performed a quick, air-freshening charm that helped, only slightly. "So, what did you want to talk about that couldn't be communicated by owl?" Hermione asked urgently. It was nearly 11, and they would need to sneak back into Hogwarts and the Slytherin dormitory when they were done here. "Well, there's rather a lot to talk about. I guess I need to start near the beginning." For the next hour, Harry wove a tale that sounded like complete madness. She had known that Voldemort was insane. To hear the level of depravity he had reached in his bid for immortality was a new level of lunacy. "And he's hidden these things, these Horcruxes. Where? What are they? And if the locket was fake, where's the real one?" Draco asked. "That's where we are now," Ron chimed in. "Dumbledore gave us the locket soon after I got here, a couple months ago. He wasn't certain who R.A.B. could be either, but then Sirius recognized the handwriting. It was his brother, Regulus. The problem was, Sirius has no idea where the real locket is. He's been trying to decontaminate the house, rid it of dark objects," Harry said. "It's been slow going, but one night a couple of weeks ago, he remembered seeing a locket in the drawing room. He thought he had thrown it away, but it turns out that Kreacher saved it." "The old house elf?" Hermione asked. "Yes, it was a rather horrifying story, to be honest, what Kreacher told us. Sirius's brother Regulus turned against Voldemort and died, in an effort to destroy the locket. He gave it to Kreacher, who has been trying to destroy it for Regulus all these years," Harry said. "The only problem was, one of the Order members has been nicking things from the house for months, to fence for extra money. His name is Mundungus Fletcher, and he's taken all kinds of stuff," said Ron. "This man has been allowed to filch Black family heirlooms?" Draco asked, agitated. "Afraid so," Harry said sympathetically. "Sirius doesn't really care. He grew up in this place, and frankly he hates it. But he's a wanted criminal, and he has nowhere else to go. Plus, he wanted to stay close to me." "So, have you asked Mundungus where the locket is?" asked Hermione. "Yeah, we did. It turns out he ran afoul of a certain ministry official who likes to throw around her authority any chance she gets," Ron answered grimly, tossing a newspaper at Hermione and Draco. Dolores Umbridge appeared in her natural habitat, surrounded by lackeys and the press, imperiously giving a speech about some ministry proclamation. Nestled among the scarves at her neck was the gleaming locket. Hermione sucked in a breath and looked up, her eyes meeting Draco's. "What has Dumbledore said about this?" Harry's eyes flashed at her. "Dumbledore is leaving this to me. This is my fight, now." "Harry," Hermione said cajolingly, "he didn't mean to hurt you by not telling you everything last year, you know. He thought he was doing what was best. We all did." This plan was ludicrous, Draco thought the following Monday as he dressed hurriedly in smart business robes. It was early, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they were supposed to sneak into McGonagall's office in about 15 minutes. He took one last look around the room, ensuring that the 3 other Slytherins were still asleep. Then he soundlessly crept into the corridor. "What took you so long?" In the semi-darkness, he could make out her gleaming copper eyes and the pink ones of Houdini. "I had to be very quiet. Theo wakes up at the sound of a mouse pissing on a flannel. I couldn't very well rush," he groused. The castle corridors were empty due to the early hour, and they crept stealthily to the Transfiguration Professor's office, letting themselves in with a non-verbal Alohomora. 12 Grimmauld Place, Hermione called out as Draco threw in the flue powder. They stepped through the green whoosh of flames and out into the sitting room of the Black House. Dumbledore sat drinking hot chocolate on a small settee. He looked up in surprise as the two of them stepped onto the hearth, both of them dressed in business robes. "Is that you, Hermione?" a voice called from the far end of the room, where Harry was entering from the small parlour next to the sitting room. He was dressed in long business robes that nearly skimmed the floor, and was accompanied by Weasley, wearing the navy blue robes of the Ministry Magical Maintenance Department. Harry looked at Dumbledore in guilty surprise, at a loss for what to say. Dumbledore cleared his throat. "I believe that perhaps I am sleepwalking, and will have no memory of this when I wake up later," he said, bestowing a small smile on all of them. "And don't mind Fawkes. It's his burning day, you see." Without another word, Dumbledore gathered his cup of hot chocolate, clamped a piece of toast smeared with raspberry jam in his mouth, and disapparated. Fawkes, as if on cue, burst into flames. Harry gave the bird a moment, then shot an Aguamenti spell at the singed rug below the bird's perch. Harry turned back to them. "All right. Are you both ready?" "No, Potter. I don't think I'll ever be ready for this," Draco grumbled. "Is there no one else I can be?" "Umbridge probably put it together that you stunned her last year," Harry reminded him. "Besides, you're supposed to be at Hogwarts. It would be odd if you just waltzed into Dolores Umbridge's office and demanded a locket." "Fine. Just nobody look at me. I'll be hideous," he said pettily. "Shut up, Git," Weasley said. He'd gone a bit red in the face, and Draco smirked, knowing his insult had hit home. "Right, so Ron has already waylaid Percy. The Confundus charm should have him wandering around London on a walking tour with some American tourists until at least lunchtime," Harry supplied, removing the vial of polyjuice from his pocket. He turned to Ron. "Do you have the hairbrush?" Ron produced the brush, and within moments an owlish Percy Weasley stared at Ron, Harry, and Hermione. With hardly a word, the four of them trooped to the front door, disapparating into the hidden alleyway near the public entrance to the Ministry. Almost immediately, the wheels seemed to be falling off of this operation. Weasley, disguised as a maintenance wizard, was sent by Yaxley to fix something in an office. Draco and Hermione, as Percy and Mafalda Hopkirk, were soon accosted by Umbridge herself, and were bustled down to the Wizengamot hearing rooms, near the Department of Mysteries. Harry, as Runcorn, was left to check Umbridge's office. Draco was having trouble focusing on anything, anxiously awaiting Potter's return. How the hell were the four of them going to get out of this? The hearings that were being conducted were ghastly. Umbridge had taken it upon herself to round up as many Muggle-borns, or suspected Muggle-borns, as she could. They were being guarded in the corridor by Dementors, and it was horrible having to push through them to get into the courtroom. It would have been nearly impossible to cast a Patronus, even if Draco had been taught how to do so. The feeling of despair was barely kept at bay by the prowling silver cat of Umbridge. Umbridge said, bestowing a smile upon the courtroom at large. "What is the next case, Mr. Weasley?" Draco looked down, pushing up the unfamiliar spectacles on his face as they slipped down a bit. "Mary Catamole," he read from the folder in front of him, in Percy Weasley's voice. Oh, no. The wizard that Weasley was impersonating had the same last name. This must be his wife. Shit, where were they? The door opened, and a frightened witch with dark hair was ushered in. She sat on the center dais seat, and the manacles clinked into place around her wrists. Draco snuck a glance at Hermione, and he saw that she was breathing very shallowly. Umbridge began reading off the charges against the witch, and Draco leaned slightly to Hermione. "Are you all right?" he whispered.
"No. When she passed me that last docket file, I saw it. She's wearing the locket."
They had not planned for this. The two of them were seated to the side and just below Umbridge. It would be nearly impossible for either of them to get to her easily. "You still have Houdini?" Draco murmured. Hermione's, Mafalda's eyes lit up.
"Yes."
She curled her body and lowered her head, reaching into her pocket surreptitiously. Draco busied himself with shuffling papers about, to distract from the fact that she was now practically ducked under the table to whisper instructions to the little ferret. From the back of the courtroom, the door burst open. The huge figure of Runcorn was pushing the slight Reg Catamole through the door.
"Ah, Albert, so glad you found him."
"Reg!" the manacled witch cried, straining against the cuffs to reach for her husband. Weasley looked nervous in his navy blue maintenance robes. From the corner of his eye, Draco was able to make out a familiar white flash of fur, one he had seen peeking out from under his bed, or in his trunk, for years. All eyes except his and Hermione's were focused on the spectacle in the center of the room. Mary Catamole was wailing, and Weasley was doing his level worst to comfort her loudly. Runcorn was blustering in the center of the room, using flaming language like "dastardly Muggle-borns" and "the Ministry will not stand for this insubordination." Draco stood, as if to quiet the Catamoles. Now higher up, he was able to see the tiny, nimble fingers of Houdini, working his magic at the locket's clasp behind Umbridge's squat neck.
"Perhaps we should recess,"
Hermione called loudly to the room.
"That won't be necessary,"
Umbridge cried, annoyed at the interruptions. The tiny ferret had almost gotten the locket off of her. It was sliding, carefully and slowly, up, over the bulky scarves that the witch wore. Then there was a tiny blur of gold and white, and Houdini had leaped into Hermione's waiting arms. Umbridge's pudgy fingers went to her neck, apparently missing the weight of the locket. At the same time, her eyes fell upon Hermione, clutching ferret and locket.
"Seize them!"
Umbridge yelled at Draco, disguised as the loyal Percy Weasley. Hermione jumped from her seat, vaulting over the railing at Runcorn and the Catamoles. Weasley tapped with his wand at the manacles holding Mary, and Draco lunged to join them. At the same time, behind him, Umbridge was doing the same. She and her smarmy Patronus cat pounced upon the witch, grasping for the locket in Hermione's grasp. Around the room, wands were drawn, but no one was certain who to hex.
"That's mine!"
Umbridge screamed, and her silver cat Patronus hissed next to her. She grabbed at the locket's chain, and Houdini's tiny grasp was no match for hers. Weasley was getting nervous, and started for the door, pushing Mary Catamole in front of him. "Let's go!" he called to the others. "Get the thing and let's go!" Potter, as Runcorn began firing off curses at the Ministry witches and wizards seated around the room, drawing their confused fire. Hermione, as Mafalda, helped Harry, pushing Houdini into her pocket as she did so. Draco drew his wand and turned on Umbridge, whose wild eyes watched as two of her supposed allies fired on Ministry officials. Everyone ignored Percy Weasley, assuming that he was on their side. "Petrificus Totalis," he said quietly, freezing Umbridge where she stood. The toadish woman tipped over, crashing to the ground, and Draco hurried to her side. Next to the woman, the angry silver Patronus cat hissed and clawed at him uselessly. Having been a member of Umbridge's inquisitorial squad for an entire year, constantly at her beck and call, Draco was quite familiar with this cat. It had roused him from his sleep, disturbed him at his studies, interrupted him numerous times in class. It had constantly demanded his attention and muscle for some stupid, petty infraction done by some student. Draco tore the locket from Umbridge's frozen grasp, leaning over her to smile wickedly down into her toad-like face. "Tell your cat," I said. "Psst, psst, 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 psst," he told her, in Percy's smarmy voice, tucking the locket into his pocket. With that, he pushed through the confused ministry officials. "Stay here! I'll go after them!" he called, in Percy's best authoritative tone, to the thoroughly confused crowd. Several dropped back, none eager to fight against Runcorn. Draco hurried after the others, finding them rounding up the Muggleborns in the corridor outside. As a large group, they filled 2 lifts, spilling out onto the ministry atrium on the ground floor. The 4 of them hurried the Muggleborns to the nearest flues. Yaxley and the handful of others from the courtroom below that had followed hurried into the atrium. "Stop them!" Yaxley shouted, even as Potter, still disguised as Runcorn, pushed people into the flue. "Let's go!" Weasley said with gritted teeth. He and Potter stepped into the flue and vanished just as Yaxley was a few steps away. Draco grabbed Hermione and rushed her to the nearest flue. Yaxley's beefy hand closed around Hermione's arm, and she struggled to pull away as they approached the grate. Draco drew back a fist and punched the other wizard in the throat. Yaxley released Hermione's elbow and stumbled backwards, pinwheeling into the crowd. As they stepped into the green flames and turned for one last look at the shocked faces gathered in the atrium, Draco's gaze landed on a familiar set of silver eyes, ones that he had seen across the dinner table for many years, ones that were so similar to his own. Lucius Malfoy stared wide-eyed at them from the center of the crowd. Draco's polyjuiced blue eyes grew huge behind Percy's thick, smudged glasses. His stomach tightened into knots. Chapter 39. Bindings and Burglaries. "There's no way he recognized you," Potter tried to reassure Draco, back in the upstairs bedroom at Grimmauld Place. "You were disguised as Percy Weasley." "I know what he means, though. At one point, we went in a lift with my father, and I was sure that if he looked me in the eye, he would know who I was." Weasley shuddered. "Never mind all that," Potter said. "We're going to have to try to come up with a way for a second attempt. The locket wasn't in her office. Maybe she left it at her house." "Potter, take a breather. We've got the locket," Draco drawled, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing it. "Why didn't you say so?" The dark-haired wizard clapped him on the back hard, grinning in relief. "You really didn't think we were going in there and coming out empty-handed, did you?" Hermione gave Potter a knowing smirk. Potter beamed from ear to ear. "This is perfect," he said. "Now, all we have to do is destroy it." Hermione and Draco exchanged a glance. Draco asked, "What spell destroys a Horcrux?" Hermione perked up as though about to answer a question in class, but it was Potter who replied. "That's the difficult part. You know how I told you that in some of the memories Riddle had a ring on, and that in the present that very same ring was broken in Dumbledore's office?" "Right," Hermione said. "You think it was some sort of family piece from the Gaunts, and Voldemort turned it into a Horcrux?" "Right. Well, Ron and I were talking it over in here one night, and the painting there—" Potter gestured to the empty stretch of canvas on the wall over one of the beds. "The wizard in the painting told us that he had watched Dumbledore destroy this ring." "So, how did he do it?" Draco asked urgently. "With the sword of Gryffindor," Potter answered. Hermione looked perplexed. "But how? I read the methods for destroying a Horcrux. None of them said anything about a sword." Weasley shook his head in wonder. Hermione, we just told you about Horcruxes last week. I'm sure there aren't any books in the Hogwarts library about them, even in the restricted section. Where the hell did you find a book that talked about destroying them?
At this, she looked vaguely uncomfortable. Well,
out with it, witch.
Draco grinned,
recognizing that they were about to hear a tale.
Well, I knew that if any library had the answers, it would be the Malfoy library, she began uncomfortably.
That's true, Draco nodded. So what? You snuck into my house over the weekend for a bit of light reading?
No,
Did you owl my mother?
No, I know that your mother is helping the Order, but I didn't want to put her in danger in case the owl was intercepted, or she opened the letter in front of Voldemort or your aunt or father.
So, how did you get in?
Weasley asked. Oh, bollocks. I asked Pym,
Hermione said miserably. Draco's face transformed slowly from one of confusion to one of self-satisfaction. You're telling me that Miss Frida Elves herself asked my personal elf to risk his life to bring you books?
I didn't want to ask him, but he's always so insistent that he's there for anything I need.
Hold on. Draco held out a hand to stop her. Pym answers your calls for him.
It was Draco's turn to look confused. No, Draco, I assumed you ordered him to offer his help to me.
Hermione, why would I order my elf to help you when you actively hate everything they do and stand for?
I don't hate,
she began hotly. You kind of do, Hermione, Potter reminded her. I have the button to prove it.
Fine. I'm a hypocrite, all right? Pym came to me one day and offered any help that I needed. I only needed to say his name, and he would appear. I didn't plan to ask him for anything, but when the Hogwarts library came up empty...
Draco shot her a confused look. So, you're able to call him?
Yes, he's come a few times when I've asked, she replied haltingly.
She ignored the other wizards' laughing smirks and asked Draco,
Why?
It's just, elf magic is tied to family lines. Pym's family has always served the Malfoy family. It's kind of like he recognized you as a Malfoy, Draco said, stunned, almost to himself.
She laughed nervously. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would...
But she trailed off as her eyes met his. Her soft lips fell open slightly in surprise. Draco cleared his throat. That's good. Yes. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks, his flush mirroring her own. Weasley and Potter looked back and forth between the two of them in confusion. What the hell's going on? Everything all right? Weasley asked.
Yes. So we were talking about how to destroy Horcruxes, Hermione said, getting them back on track. The book only named 2 ways to do this. Fiend fire was the first, and it's incredibly unstable. The second was basilisk venom. Nothing to do with swords.
But the wizard in the painting was very specific. Dumbledore used the sword of Gryffindor to destroy the ring, Potter said. He had no reason to lie. Perhaps he wasn't lying, Draco offered. The sword of Gryffindor is made from goblin-wrought silver, isn't it?
Weasley shrugged, and Potter looked confused, but it was Hermione who answered affirmatively. That's right. I read all about Godric Gryffindor and his sword in Hogwarts: A History.
These last 3 words were mouthed by all 3 wizards in the room as she said them. Her eyes flashed angrily.
You all don't need to be so rude. All three of them chuckled shamefacedly. Weasley spoke up. "Sorry, Hermione. It's just, well, I think you and Percy are the only people to have ever read that book."
"Well, it's a good thing someone did," Hermione said waspishly. "I think what you're getting at, Draco, is that goblin-made silver only imbibes things that make it stronger. Is that right? It's the reason it never needs polishing, because dirt would not make it stronger."
"Huh. So, you're telling me when I stabbed that snake in the Chamber of Secrets,
the sword took on the characteristics of the powerful basilisk venom,"
Hermione finished for Potter. "Perfect. So, all we need to do is to get the sword of Gryffindor?" Weasley asked. "Where's it kept?" "I think it's in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts," Potter answered. "It's a shame Dumbledore didn't bring it with him when he left. Do you think the two of you could ask Snape for it?"
Draco exhaled loudly and shook his head.
"I don't think so. The Carrows are watching everything pretty closely, and Snape can't be seen as being sympathetic to anyone. I think even if we were to come up with some cock-and-bull story about needing to give it to the Dark Lord, one of them would try and take it from us in order to steal our glory or some other such nonsense." "So, you'll need to come up with a way to steal it from him." Weasley grimaced. "Any ideas?" "The Carrows think we're on their side. It can't be done by us."
Draco looked up at Hermione and nodded.
"We're going to need some help."
"Why the hell should we do anything to help the two of you?" Neville Longbottom stood with his arms crossed, face flushed in anger. He felt duped. His Dumbledore's army coin had warmed in his pocket, where he kept it still, for old time's sake. It contained only a date and a time, as the location would be the same, the room of requirement. He came at the appointed day and time. His hopeful expectation was to find the entirety of Dumbledore's army, including Ron Weasley and Harry Potter. Instead, he found only Ginny Weasley and Luna Lovegood. He smiled in greeting, a bit sadly at them. Apparently, the three of them were the only ones who still checked their coins regularly. The door opened once more, admitting Hermione and Draco Malfoy. Neville jumped to his feet, wand drawn. "The two of you aren't welcome here. Get out!" "Neville, we need to talk,"
Hermione began. "You've got nothing to say that I want to hear," he spit out angrily. "The two of you are nothing but murderers."
From behind him, a voice spoke up.
"Actually, Nev, they're not," Ginny Weasley said. "What the hell are you on about, Gin? All of us were there for the funeral. All of us talked to Harry afterwards. We know what he saw."
"We know what he thought he saw, Neville," Ginny said. Hermione and Draco stayed quiet, wisely, knowing that this needed to come from someone else. Ginny reached into her pocket and withdrew a photograph taken over the summer, holding it out to Neville.
"What's this?"
the Gryffindor wizard asked scornfully.
"Proof," Ginny said simply. "Look at the photograph. It's me, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Do we look upset or angry?" "So what? This could have been taken at any time," Neville said angrily.
Ginny shook her head. "Look closely at my shirt in the photograph, Nev. It's a Weird Sisters concert shirt, isn't it?" Neville squinted at the photograph, as Luna looked on interestedly. "Yes," the dreamy-eyed Ravenclaw said. "It's a shirt from their July tour."
Ginny nodded. "That's right. A tour that didn't start until after Dumbledore died. You know what that means, right?"
"This could have been faked," Neville said, shaking his head but with less anger than before. It was Hermione's turn to speak up. "Neville, you know me. We've known each other for 6 years. I helped Harry for Dumbledore's army. Do you really think I could kill Dumbledore?" After a moment, Neville's shoulders slumped, and he lowered his wand. "No. When it comes down to it, no. I don't think you could."
"I know she didn't," Luna offered with a tiny smile. "What do you mean, Luna?" Hermione asked. "I was looking out the window at Ravenclaw Tower that night. I saw the green light and thought at first that perhaps it was the Aurora Borealis, so I was watching. I saw Professor Lupin help Dumbledore up from the ground, and another Dumbledore laid down in his place. Lupin stunned the second one, and the first one disappeared."
Hermione, Ginny, and Draco stared open-mouthed at the blonde witch. "Luna," Draco finally found his voice, "how did you know not to say anything?"
"I'm not sure if you know this, but I have a reputation for saying fanciful things sometimes," Luna said, a bit wistfully. "I assumed that no one would believe me if I told them."
Each of them considered this and nodded, knowing it to be true. Neville turned back to the rest of them. "All right. I suppose it's possible that Dumbledore is alive. So, what are we doing here? Why did you call us here?"
"About that, Harry needs a favor."
It was decided that Luna, Neville, and Ginny would be the ones to break into Snape's office in order to take the sword of Gryffindor. Hermione and Draco would act as lookouts and would pretend to capture them and take them away for punishment if they ran into the Carrows. It wasn't the greatest plan, but on short notice it would have to do. They convened the following night next to the gargoyle that guarded the headmaster's office. Draco had managed to find out the password to the office simply by accosting Snape earlier that day as he was entering, and coming up with an inane topic of conversation. Because it had been with Snape, the conversation had not gone well, but at least he'd gotten what he came for. "Fidelity," Neville whispered to the gargoyle, and he and the two witches disappeared up the moving staircase towards the office. No sooner were they gone than an even, drawling voice behind them spoke. "I sincerely hope that this poor excuse for a plan was thought up by Longbottom, because I would have expected better from the two of you." They turned, finding nothing, but after a moment Snape removed his disillusionment charm and revealed himself. "What precisely are they searching for?" Draco and Hermione froze. Potter had emphasized the need for secrecy regarding this Horcrux hunt, and they were certain this included Severus Snape. But it could not be helped. The moment the three of them walked back down the stairs, carrying a large silver sword with egg-sized rubies encrusted on the hilt, the game would be up. However, Snape had some idea. "Am I to assume that this has something to do with your Halloween meeting with Potter?"
Hermione furrowed her brow. "How did you—"
"As head master of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, it is my job to know things, Miss Granger. It is your job to learn things, and the first thing you should have learned years ago is caution. Perhaps you are unaware, but there are those within the school who care not for your position with certain wizards. Your blood status alone is enough to have you tortured, or worse, killed." Draco's anger was rising in his chest. "Anyone who touches a hair on Hermione's head— yes! I'm well aware that anyone touching her hair is taking their life in their hands, Mr. Malfoy. It is a weapon unto itself. However, the fact remains that doing something such as this, a brazen act of rebellion, will not play well in your favor."
Just then, Ginny started down the stairs, followed by Neville and Luna. "No luck," she said as she came, not realizing the 5 of them weren't alone. "You're a Weasley. You should get used to it," Snape snapped. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Draco had to stifle a laugh. "Longbottom, please escort these witches to their common rooms. The 3 of you will report to Professor Hagrid every evening this week at 9 o'clock for detention." Dejected, the 3 of them exchanged sorrowful glances with Hermione and Draco before setting off. The young couple turned to leave as well, but were stopped by Snape. "A moment of your time, if you will." "Please step into my office," the professor said, pointing them up the stairs. The office looked much the same as it had when Professor Dumbledore had been headmaster, with the notable exception of one new portrait, that of a sleeping Professor Dumbledore. Snape noticed them looking at it. If you are waiting for it to speak, you will need to wait a bit longer, as you know. When I wish to speak to our former head, I must use the flu like everyone else. Draco decided for a conciliatory tone. "Sir, we apologize for breaking in. It won't happen again." "Indeed, it will not, Mr. Malfoy. Tomorrow's security, and every day hereafter, will be much tighter. I'm certain that by tomorrow the Carrows will be aware of what happened here tonight, or at least the other 3's parts in it." "Will they be punished?" Hermione said fearfully.
"No. As headmaster, I still have some authority in meting out punishments for wrongdoers. However, there may be more scrutiny on the 3 of them after this."
Snape stood and paced the length of the room.
"What is it you were after tonight?"
The quiet of the room seemed to stretch out and expand around them. Draco sighed. Having had Professor Snape as his head of house for 6 years, he was well aware of Snape's ability to wear people down simply by waiting them out in silence. Finally, he could take it no more. "We came for the sword of Gryffindor," he said, ignoring Hermione's look of exasperation. "For what purpose?" "Potter needs it." "Ah, well, if the famous Harry Potter needs it," Snape began snidely. "Professor," Hermione interrupted, "you know the prophecy as well as we do. It's important, sir." Snape curled his lip at Hermione's last-minute attempt at deference.
"As a Gryffindor, Miss Granger, particularly one who has read Hogwarts, a history, I find it appalling that you assume that simply picking up the sword and giving it to Potter will be sufficient."
Hermione was silent, contemplating what he meant. Then she said, "It has to be taken under conditions of need and valor. Of course, it never would have worked."
"No,"
said Snape simply.
"So what does Potter need to do? Does he need to fight a troll or wrestle a centaur or something?"
Draco asked snidely. Snape fixed him with a glare for several seconds before answering.
"Rest assured, when the time is right and the conditions are met, there will be an opportunity to claim the sword of Gryffindor. However, that time and condition is not tonight. You may go."
They stood uncertainly, and when it became apparent that Snape was done with them, they walked out the door and began the long trek to the dungeons.
"Well, I suppose it's out of our hands," Draco said.
"I hate to give up, but I think you're right. What he said is correct, about valor and such."
Ahead,
In the darkness, a pair of bulging, lamp-like eyes were fixed upon them.
"Mrs. Norris," Draco whispered. "Move, fast, keep moving. We can outrun Filch if we have to."
Hermione smiled a bit at the absurdity of it, as she and Draco tore down the last 2 staircases and the dungeon corridor, careening around the doorway of the Slytherin common room, before dissolving in a fit of laughter on a sofa. It was a small comfort to her, knowing that, even as the fate of the wizarding world hung in the balance, essentially held at wand point by a crazed wizard and his army, this one thing remained the same. August Filch could still be counted upon to harass students who had the temerity to leave their common rooms after 9 o'clock.
Thank you for listening to The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. If you enjoyed this and would like to listen to more, please subscribe to me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts at Silver and Copper, or search Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.